Hey, Mount Hope, thanks so much for tuning in to our next episode of our Cabin Chat series. We are just about to wrap up this thing. Next week will be our final episode as we'll be chatting on the front steps of our cabin, Solomon's Porch. But today I'm actually sitting out in front of one of our girls' cabins called Isle of Patmos, all right, or Patmos, whichever how you pronounce it. That's up to you. But honestly, Isle of Patmos is actually setting in a different location than it did just a few short years ago. And so I just kind of want to talk about that, and that kind of sets the stage for why we named it Isle of Patmos. Currently, it sits just below Hannah's Promise on the other side of the tabernacle. It's kind of like in a triangle here with Hannah's Promise and the new girl shower house. But it used to sit in the middle of our parking lot right beside our staff house. Isle of Patmos was the cabin that was kind of isolated from every other camper housing that we have. It was exiled, all right? And we'll talk more about that word in a second. But honestly, what we would do is we would use it for overflow housing, even for guys or girls, because that cabin was separated from all the rest of the girls' cabins, and then obviously a long distance from the rest of the guys' cabins. And so we would use that cabin for overflow. But currently what we decided to do is go ahead and move it over here on below Hannah's Promise, where it currently sits, and just make it strictly a girls' cabin now, so we could open up that front space for more parking. But the reason it got its name was simply because it was isolated and exiled from the rest of camper housing. Now, what I want to do is I want to jump in straight to Revelation chapter 1, and we'll talk more about why the exile and Isle of Patmos goes together. Okay? Revelation chapter 1, and again, as always, spend some time with your family this week talking about this story and the name of our cabin. But let's go Revelation chapter 1, verse 9. It says this: I, John, who also am your brother and companion in tribulation and in the kingdom and patience of Jesus Christ, was in the isle that is called Patmos for the word of God and for the testimony of Jesus Christ. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day and heard behind me a great voice as of a trumpet, saying, I am the Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. And what thou seest, write it in a book, and send it unto the 7 churches which are in Asia, unto Ephesus, unto Smyrna, unto Pergamos, and to Thyatira, and unto Sardis, unto Philadelphia, and unto Laodicea. So to really understand this, we first have to start with I, John, right? We need to talk about which John we're talking about here. And honestly, it's the John that Jesus called to be one of his disciples. Early on, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, right? This John actually became not only a disciple, but was part of the inner circle of Jesus. And honestly, Jesus referred to him as the one that he loved. At the crucifixion, he was the one that was present and that Jesus charged to take care of his mother Mary after he was gone. This same John, tradition hints that it was part of the early work at the church of Ephesus, and just in the early church in general, was a force to be reckoned with. In fact, that honestly sets up how we get to Isle of Patmos. The Romans at the time, anything that could potentially be an issue when it came to political uprising or messing with the order that they had established, and preaching the message of Jesus was just that, or at least that's what they considered it to be. And so any uprising like that would require a response. And the response was that they would gather up those individuals and they would ship them off to an island and kind of exile them, isolate them from the rest of the world. And that was kind of what happened really to John. Actually, it's exactly how it words it in verse 9, or he words it in verse 9. It was in the isle that is called Patmos. Why? For the word of God and for the testimony of Jesus Christ. And so basically the Romans shipped him off to this island of Patmos, this island just off the southwest corner of Turkey. not a very large island, very rocky terrain, and that's where John spent some time because of his faith in Jesus Christ. Now, while he was there, he received a lot of prophetic visions. I've heard it divided up that there's visions of past, present, and honestly mostly future. Chapters 4 through 21 is really more of future prophetic visions, and honestly it's a lot more than what I want to get into. And honestly, the imagery there, it's difficult to interpret, and I'll be the first one to say I don't have all the answers to that. But what I do know is that John was exiled to this Isle of Patmos because of his faith in Jesus Christ. And that's really what I want to mention and talk to you about. The persecution that we face as Christians in America is definitely different than the persecution that many might face around the world. But I say that to say that we still experience persecution. It might simply be somebody at school might make fun of you because maybe you carry a Bible to school, or they know that you are a Christian. Maybe you don't get invited to certain events because they don't want Christians around, right? Or, well, I don't know. Who knows what the persecution might necessarily look like, and who knows what is in store for us in the future. It might come a day and a time when our life is actually on the line because of our faith in Jesus Christ. And my challenge to you is this, is to remember that Jesus is worth it. He is more, he is greater than the pain and the suffering that you might experience in persecution. And so my challenge to you is to hold fast to him. Hold on to your faith in Jesus in the midst of persecution, and allow Jesus to do something beautiful and magnificent in the midst of that persecution. That's exactly what happened with John, and I hope the same is true for you. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching today. Check back next week for our next episode and final episode as we sit on the porch of Solomon's porch. All right.